Hello and welcome to those of you who are showing up early. We appreciate it. We will be starting at the top of the hour, but in the meantime, we do have a poll that we'd like to launch here to see, just kind of get a gist for what you guys are doing currently. So I'm going to launch that right now. And go ahead and fill that out as you please. Thank you. So this first poll is, are you currently using NetSuite? It looks like we got almost a 50-50 split here. All right, give it a few more seconds as people start coming in. Wow, got quite a few people using NetSuite. That's great. All right, so I'm going to close this poll up. Thank you guys for your responses. And we have one more, and I guess it'll only apply to about half of you since most of you are already using NetSuite, but I'll launch it anyways. So for those of you who are not already using NetSuite, are you looking to switch from your current ERP to NetSuite? All right, we're at the top of the hour. I'm going to close this poll. Looks like it's at about 50-50 for this one as well. So let's close this up. And for those of you who are just joining us, thank you very much for joining us. And everyone who has been here, again, thank you for taking some time to join us for our webinar today. We are going through the ERP experience, the customer's perspective. And what we're going to be kind of going over today is just some introductions into who we have here today, as well as some why NetSuite, why the cloud, some experiences with implementation, some lessons learned, and then kind of what we'd like to see from the future of NetSuite. So let's just get right into it. I'll introduce myself first. I'm not going to be speaking too much here, but my name's Nick. I'm a sales executive here at AlphaBOLD. I'm a bold enthusiast. Got 9 years of customer-focused account management, and I just really enjoy technology overall. And we are lucky to have Aaron Bernard here. Aaron, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Nick. My name is Aaron Bernard. I'm the internal systems manager at Fontaine US. I've been working IT for probably 25, going on 30 years. We've been on the NetSuite platform for about 7 years now.
Okay, cool. And Ilya, we are lucky to have you here as well. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ilya Budimir. I'm a NetSuite practice manager here at AlphaBOLD. I have around 10 years of ERP experience in NetSuite, mostly from implementation, project management, technical projects, you name it. I did it.
Great, great. So I guess, Aaron, let's start with you, if you don't mind. Kind of, can you give us some background as far as your company, what we're using before NetSuite, and kind of what launched that urge to jump into NetSuite?
Sure. When I first got to Fontaine, we're Blue back then, we had no systems whatsoever. We were doing everything with spreadsheets. It was a very manual process for all our functions. So myself and the supply chain manager, a gentleman named Charles Thurston, started looking for an ERP system. And we went to several different places. First, we looked at NetSuite, we looked at SAP, we looked at Microsoft Dynamics, we even looked at QuickBooks. And from our requirements that we gathered, we decided that NetSuite was definitely the choice for us. A lot of reasons were for that. The ease of use, cost was primary as well. But we just felt that the system would fit our needs just much better than any other system we looked at.
Okay. And was it the manual processes that kind of drove that urge to get in there?
That was the primary. Yes, we really couldn't. Our business really couldn't function. I mean, we were just an online business, but as our business grew, our systems that we had in place just couldn't keep up with the business. So we had to migrate to something. We were an online business at one point in time, and we couldn't tie anything together. So getting NetSuite gave us the ability to tie everything in. We were going to integrate our systems with our Magento shopping cart platform. We were able to get a hold of our inventory. And again, most of our manufacturing was done in China, so we're able to combine all these systems to give us a one picture view of our company. I mean, the financial piece was also very key because it was a very manual process, 8,000 spreadsheets. So NetSuite gave us the ability to house everything under one roof, so to speak.
Gotcha. And I mean, was there ever kind of a decision between on-prem and the cloud, or did you guys just go straight for cloud?
We went straight to the cloud. Number one, we didn't have the infrastructure, nor did we have the personnel to maintain anything on-prem. And again, we were kind of ahead of our time because when I got there, that was my primary edict. I wanted everything in the cloud. I just didn't want to deal with the maintenance, the upgrades, the people costs associated with having anything on-prem. So the majority of our applications are all cloud-based.
Okay. And when did you guys do the implementation, or when did you go live with NetSuite?
We went live July 2013.
Okay, so you guys have been on it for a while. Good. And then I guess, Ilya, when did you kind of come into the picture for Aaron here?
I believe it was in 2013 when they were wrapping up the implementation. They were facing some process issues. Their implementation team completed or wrapped up the implementation, and they still, as a team, had some questions and needed some help to properly configure NetSuite and resolve some immediate issues. So they reached out to my employer or to NetSuite, and then as a NetSuite professional services consultant, I joined the team to help out, essentially. Wrap that implementation up.
And Aaron, I guess how did you know when to reach out to Ilya? Was there like a specific challenge within the implementation where you're just like, we need help here?
We needed help. Again, our sister company was using SAP, so our configuration, we mimicked a lot of the SAP functionality, so to speak, in NetSuite. So when it was initially completed, we were just still having issues. And again, I will tell everybody, you don't know what you don't know until you actually go live with this. So we reached out to the gentleman at NetSuite, and we'd have calls and we'd ask specific questions, and we just weren't happy with the answers we were receiving. Myself, supply chain manager, we did a lot of research, and we knew that the system could do certain things where we were told, no, it can't. So finally, we got the resource for Ilya. I mean, it's a funny story too, because when Ilya came on board, I think I talked to him prior to him coming on site and kind of letting him know that this is going to be a very poor choice of word, but this is going to be like going to the lion's den here, because people had gotten frustrated with the way the system was running and the functionality. And Ilya came in and he kind of smoothed everything over, got the system functioning to where it was exactly how we envisioned it to function originally versus what we kind of ended up with.
Yeah, but I have to say, Aaron, you stressed me out a bit. I did have one.
Yeah, that's kind of what our partnership began. I mean, I consider us friends now, but it was a very tenuous situation at that point in time, because we were trying to figure out why isn't this functioning properly, and why is this not doing what we expected it to do in the way we wanted it to function. So Ilya did come in and he kind of smoothed all over for us, so we've been quite happy with it since then.
Okay, and Ilya, I mean, from your perspective coming into it, how do you think their implementation was going? I mean, did you come in and it was just like, oh my gosh, we got to start from square one, or was it just kind of some minor tweaks and stuff from there?
No, they actually had a good implementation. I think they had a very experienced project manager and consultant working on a project. It's just what happens is NetSuite kind of comes in, completes the project, and they usually leave. And then there's usually that void, that transition, the void when the client is transitioning from the implementation to ongoing support. And I think I just filled in that void. Yeah.
Very good way to describe it, Ila. That's exactly right. I mean, again, he really came in and kind of got us over the hump, so to speak.
Right, right. And that's really what it is that period between go live and running in NetSuite without any impediments. You know, it's very crucial. You need to make sure that you have enough support and that everybody who needs to get trained is there. Yeah.
And like as far as that ongoing support, Aaron, how do you kind of define who to work with or what to look for in a partner?
Well, again, with me, it has to be a partnership. It isn't just you work for me. When I got a problem, I call you. I kind of want somebody that's ingrained in our system. So with me, number one, we usually go with the gold certified partners from NetSuite, but I like to interview and get a feeling for how they operate. I mean, I want somebody that, hey, NetSuite is going to be doing A, B, and C. Here's how this may impact your business. I mean, although I work, there's other things that I have to do as well, so I can't just be in NetSuite 24/7, 365. So I like the fact that we have a business partner that can say, with the new release, so to speak, it's going to have this and this and this in here, and this is how this may impact your business, or this is how this can enhance your business or make things work much easier or smoother. So that's one of the key things for me. And of course, I want to be able to trust this person or this company. And I like to have a very solid working relationship. Like I said earlier, I consider Ilya a friend of mine. We've known each other since, 7 years ago. And whenever there's an issue with NetSuite, I can feel I can call him and I'm not on the clock being billed. If I'm like, hey, I want to bounce something off you. What do you think about this? Or we're thinking about doing this. How would you proceed with this? So it's very beneficial, to very good working relationship. Like, again, I consider AlphaBOLD as a strategic partner of ours. We really couldn't do this without them. They've been very beneficial in our business, and as it changes, I mean, they kind of help us out. Sometimes Ela will show me the right path to go, because I could be heading to the left and he'll say, no, that's not going to work. You might want to think about this, which kind of rears me back in the right direction as far as it's concerned with NetSuite. So that's one of the key things, to make sure you have a comfortable space with your partner and that you guys are on the same page.
And can I ask you something, sorry, Nick, I just have a question for Aaron. Aaron,
Sure.
when it comes to partners, when it comes to consultants, which kind of a consultant do you prefer? Someone who is accommodating and may not give you the let's say full picture maybe of everything, or do you like consultants that are more, they will give you the positives and the negatives of the project? What style do you like? Because everybody's a little bit different, and I know I can give a little pushback sometimes, so I'm just wondering, what style do you like?
I need the whole truth, because in the end, it's going to fall on me anyway. So I'd rather know the ins and outs, the positives and the negatives, that way I can make an informed decision. If you just tell me what I hear, okay, we go live and it doesn't work, and I'm like, well, you told me this was going to function this way. And then it says, well, but you didn't think about this. So I want the whole picture. That way I can make the right decision moving forward. And sometimes we may disagree. Sometimes you may say it's going to do this. I'm like, yeah, but that's not where our business is headed. I need to function in a different way. So I think just having a strategic partner and making sure that we're truthful with one another, because I don't like dealing with people who are going to tell me the entire fact set.
Right. So you prefer honesty at the cost of minimal confrontation, right?
Well, there's nothing wrong with confrontation. I guess because I'm a little older, I don't mind if we disagree, provided our disagreements are based in fact. I mean, we don't really get emotional. It's like this is how the system is. And sometimes you have to accept it, because every system does have limitations.
Right.
And it's not about the problem. It's always about the solution. I mean, I tell people that work for me, don't come to me with a problem without a solution, or at least be able to tell me what the problem is and why we're having the problem. So that's why I think we work very well together, because we have a cohesiveness, and I understand our business.
So segueing into the actual implementation, Aaron, on your side, how long can you expect an implementation to last, or at least how long did yours last?
I think ours lasted 3 to 4 months. And again, we came from no system, so I think it would be a bit longer if we were migrating from one system to the next. With us, it was more of the making sure our integration worked properly with the SAP instance of our sister company. Process probably was a little bit quicker than it probably should have been. henceforth us having the little knowledge gap toward the end once we implement it. I mean, to me, 3 months is minimum depending on where you're starting from. The key point with that is gathering your requirements and making sure you have a good understanding of what your current processes are and how do you transfer that into the NetSuite platform. So 3 months, it could go up to a year. I mean, I've worked with other people that spend a year for their implementation and they're still not right. I just like to have a start and an end date for things. That way we have a date we're shooting for, if it's possible. Yep.
And Ilya, I mean, is that kind of in line with what your experiences are?
Absolutely. I think 3 to 4 months is really what you need for a successful implementation. I would even say 4 months is a perfect perfect duration or perfect timeline, because it gives you a little time to test the system, gives you maybe 3 weeks at least of UAT, user acceptance testing, to make sure that everything that we've configured and built, your users or clients' users had time to test and break, right? So that's crucial.
And as far as within that initial time period, Ilya, from your standpoint, how much of your client's time do you need, especially in that first get-go, to get everything up and running?
So there's a formula that I use. So what I tell clients is whatever time we use for the implementation, the users or the stakeholders or the members, the team members of the company whom we're implementing, they need to use twice as much time, or sometimes even more, right? Or they need to dedicate twice as much time to the implementation, because we know the system, right? So we're showing them and configuring the system for them. These are joint implementations. We work as a team, so they need some time to ramp up. So they need to devote, each member needs to devote almost around 20 hours per week on that implementation. And I'm talking about the members that are heavily involved, that are the stakeholders or SMEs.
There's a little homework involved with it.
Right. So for example, after each config session, we give little tasks, little assignments, little homework. Because you need to test different things. You need to see how the application behaves. And without that, you won't be able to learn it properly.
Yeah. And Aaron, on your side, is it, for you guys, was it successful to have kind of like a power user and then distribute from there, or did you have a lot of stakeholders involved throughout the whole process, all learning at the same time?
We had a lot of stakeholders throughout the process. And I will tell everybody, this has got to be a top-down thing, from the senior management down to, we'll just say, your customer service rep. If you're going to touch the system, you have to be comfortable with the system and how the system functions. To Ilya's point, the 20 hours is probably bare minimums, because sometimes people have never seen the screen before. They're not used to this ERP system. The navigation may be different from ERP systems in the past. Their comfort level has to be there for a good implementation, because the last thing you're going to want is for someone to go live and the first thing they say is, I don't know how to do this, or this doesn't look how we're doing in testing. So they have to get a level of comfort that, they can function, go live. Day one, they're ready to rock and roll. They're not calling the help that's saying, how do I enter a purchase order, or how do I create an invoice? So it's very important that all your end users spend enough time, not just your super users. Everyone needs to be comfortable with the system. So as much time as possible. And when you're going through an implementation, it has to be dedicated time. It can't be I'm doing this, yet I'm doing that. You have to be dedicated. And I'm really like documenting the stuff as well. People forget things, so I call it a Bible for them when they sit down and start working. If you have a question, you go through it, kind of find the information if you can. But I like a lot of hands-on usage. That's why we have multiple sandboxes. When someone comes on board, get in the sandbox, start learning. You really can't break anything. Well, you can, but it's nothing that we can fix. So get dirty in there, get your hands in there, learn the system. You may have follow-up questions. You may have a process that you may know that may work better. So I like the collaborative process when we're doing things. So I do like the end users to get in there. I mean, I know the system, they don't, like to Ilya's point. So they need to understand this and know how the system works so they can be as productive as possible.
Yeah. And Ilya, what stakeholders do you usually work with during an implementation?
So it really depends on the type of project, right? But typically it would be the CFO, the CEO, depending on the organization. Sometimes if it's an enterprise, you're sometimes working with IT personnel, experts, subject matter experts in specific fields, procurement, manufacturing, sales managers. So those are the experts that we work with. They understand their business, and then we need to decipher that information and then figure out how to apply it to this system, right? And sometimes it's a collaboration. Sometimes it's a heated discussion. You know, sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I always have done my business this way in the system, and I want it done this way." And they may have strong feelings about how they want their processes to implement it. And it's always a discussion. You try to understand why, and you try to mold their process or mold NetSuite to most of the time mold the process to fit in NetSuite correctly. And that's the goal. That's the end goal. And you get there by working with all of these SMEs and experts in their jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, to your point, Ilya, that's where the trust comes in, because you really want to be able to tell them this isn't going to work in NetSuite, and here's why, and this is the way you want to do it. So the trust factor comes in there, where you can say, okay, I understand what you're saying, so we can move this process, because this is going to be much better for me down the road.
And that's a huge thing. If the customer, the client doesn't trust you, you will not accomplish anything. There needs to be that trust. And once the customer has chosen the partner, they need to be able to trust them. They need to be able to consider them as experts and then trust them. And without that, implementations fail.
And
I will say I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I will say from the perspective of the client, you do need to gain as much knowledge as you possibly can on the system. I mean, you really need to get a basic understanding of how the system functions, the different modules, how they interact with each other. That way you can have a conversation that's going to make some sense. Because, I mean, again, when I got to NetSuite, I got the book, I just started learning. I got NetSuite for Dummies right off the bat, just so I could familiarize myself with the system. But the more knowledge you know, it will expedite some of these questions you're having, but you'll get a better understanding of how the system functions. That way, when you're meeting with your business partner, they're discussing how NetSuite works, you have a frame of reference. I mean, I understand most ERPs act the same to a certain extent, but they all have their idiosyncrasies and how they function. So gain as much knowledge as you possibly can before you start having these conversations.
Right. And it seems like a lot of those conversations are around kind of either molding NetSuite to your current processes or changing those processes over. Aaron, from your perspective, how do you know when your process needs to change versus you need to make a change within NetSuite?
Good question.
The thing, I always look down the road 2, 3 years, 5 years. Is our process, number one, I like to review it quarterly. Are we doing it the most economical way? Is it cheaper? Is it faster? Can we make this process better? The system will run much smoother. So with me, I take those key parameters and start looking at our current processes, and is there a better way to do this? And that's always my key point, every quarter, to constantly go back and try to finish it, make it work better, faster. And if it turns out that we're doing it an improper way or there's a better way to do it, that's when I make the call. I mean, cost matters as well, but if we can save money or we can get a better process is when we determine to change our processes over.
Is there an exercise that you do? Is there maybe sort of a list of functional pieces or features that you look at that exist in NetSuite based on which you decide, whether you're good with that and whether it's worth to do a customization or not? I mean, do you have some sort of criteria for deciding whether NetSuite can be a good tool for a specific functional module, and how do you decide when it's worth to do the customization?
Yeah, and a lot of it depends on your business and where you're going. Like case in point, with us, we used to do assembly build for most of our items. We switched over to a different item type because the business changed. And we need to be able to adapt and change with the business. So those are some of the key parameters you need to be aware of or cognizant of when you start looking at your processes and how you want to change them or change the overall structure and configure your system. So again, sometimes the business will dictate due to change.
Right. Right, and sometimes also, for example, when we do implementations, Nick, we try not to customize NetSuite at all. You know, our goal is to use out-of-the-box features and then adapt the processes to what's available in NetSuite most of the time. But sometimes you need to tweak something. You know, you need to add a field here and there, and those are minor adjustments. Now, it happens that sometimes you need a unique functionality. And what I like to do is I like to figure out what is the cost of bringing that functionality into NetSuite. If there are no integrations, if there are no third-party apps, what is the cost of re-engineering or engineering from scratch that functionality in NetSuite? And if the time goes over a certain number of hours, you know, 20, 30, to me, it's not worth it building that functionality from scratch. If there's a third-party tool already, it's always going to be cheaper to integrate with a third-party tool than to build something, engineer something from scratch, because you're taking a functionality that's been tested and it's been proven and that has been vetted with many users, and you're bringing it into NetSuite as opposed to re-engineering everything from scratch. So
I got a question for you then. All right, how do you determine which third-party tool you're going to use? Say, for instance, for the tax calculation, there's AlphaBOLD, there's all kinds of other tax engines as well. And I also know you configured it in NetSuite. How do you determine, outside of cost, which party you would use for the third-party vendor?
Well, it's all based on our experiences, right? So clients come to us for advice, and they ask us, you know, what is the tax tool that I can use? And the major players are AlphaBOLD. There's another player, I can't remember the name, but they have native integrations. And one thing that I like to stress is that you always want to choose an integration that's been out there, or connector that's been out there the longest, because it's been vetted, because it's been used by so many different users, and all of the bugs, or most of them, have been fixed. So that's how I make a determination. And usually clients come to us to ask us for advice, right? They trust us, they come to us and they ask us, you know, what's the best tool? And then based on our experience, we give recommendations. And note, there are tools coming out every day, right? But just because a tool says that they have all the features that you need, some of that functionality and how it interacts with NetSuite needs to be vetted, you know.
And Ilya, I think this is a question for you. We had a question come in over on the question box, and they kind of asked, how do you talk a customer out of kind of trying to mimic an old system? Like, NetSuite is built for, they had the suite success. There was all these different types of suites that are generally made for pretty much any industry. But if someone's trying to just copycat an old system, how do you kind of convert that person?
With difficulty. It's not easy. It's not easy. But what we try to do is we try to explain that suite success, for example, is really amalgamation of all this experience, right? All these consultants and customers and projects were brought to life, and there were hours and hours of configuration and experience that created this suite success vertical, right? So the argument is easy. You know, you want to implement something that works best in NetSuite, right? And that's the real answer, right? You want to use something that's been tried, that's been tested, and that it's true. And for example, suite success module has, for every process in NetSuite, there are 3 ways of doing things. You know, it's not like, oh, there's only one way to do something in NetSuite. No, there's 3 ways for every single thing that you can pick, right? So So, but sometimes even with that, it's challenging to convince the client, right? But that would be my argument. My argument would be, look, all of this experience, this is how it's done. Let's look at your process and let's see how different it is from, and what's the end result of the process, right? And if the end result is the same between how it's done in NetSuite and what you need to achieve, then the decision is easy to make, right? So it's really the end goal as opposed to how do you get there.
Yeah, and I think it's something that Aaron even touched on earlier. It's you got to have that level of trust too, because
Right.
if you don't trust your partner,
And
then
again,
why would you take their advice?
and Ela, you have to show them the benefits of the change. I know people sometimes get stuck in a specific place, and I've always relied on that. If I can show you how changing to this process is going to make life much easier, you'll be much more efficient. It's always the best selling tool I've ever had when it comes to change, because people don't like change, but sometimes change is necessary. But I always start the conversation with, I'm about to do you a huge favor, make your life so much easier. You're gonna love me after this. And sometimes in the end, they don't love me, but usually it's a much better process and they're much happier when we're done.
Right. Right.
So let's move on from the implementation and kind of look back on kind of what you experienced. And Aaron, for you, what went well during implementation? What can you, I guess, do to make sure and ensure that implementation goes well?
I think our implementation went fairly well. Again, we had the issue toward the end and go live, that little period that wasn't that great. We had NetSuite do our implementation when we originally set up our system. I thought he understood our business to a certain extent. And again, we were a hybrid because you had two different companies here and everybody kind of had competing goals at a certain time. I thought he got a good idea gathering requirements for us, and the configuration I thought was done well. He asked the right questions, which is always a key point for me when I'm dealing with people. Because you should know what they're going to ask prior to, just to make sure that you're getting all your requirements gathered. He asked the right questions. Our timeline was probably a bit quicker than it needed to be. I think we should have invested a bit more time in user training. But as far as getting the system up and running, they did a phenomenal job on that. Again, we should have just put more focus on the learning piece, which we really just didn't have time to do because, again, we came from no system to NetSuite. Picking our vendors, some of those things we probably could have looked at differently. I mean, I'm not going to name the vendors that we currently use, but some of them we should have probably given some more thought to. If you tend to run into this issue where you'll hire a vendor and the vendor really won't have the bandwidth, because you get to the point where you want to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody, where certain vendors you can't. Certain vendors you have to place a ticket and it'll go through the system where it's a tier 1 to you and maybe a tier 3 to them. So you need to make sure you're picking the right vendors and you're going to get the right support. I mean, SLA means certain things to certain people and certain things to others. What's critical to me may not be critical to them. And if you're saying you'll respond back within 24 hours, 9 times out of 10, this is not enough. I need somebody that's going to call me and we can work this issue out rather quickly, because it's affecting more than just one person. It could be multiple throughout the business. You could have an issue. So that was a key thing. Training, getting knowledge of the system, and interviewing. It sounds crazy, but I kind of wish we could have interviewed more people when we started this process, because we kind of went top down. And I think versus getting your SMEs who are going to know the system, you need to talk to the lady that's going to be doing the billing, the gentleman that's going to be in customer service, creating the orders and the cases, that's the supply chain people. Here's how we want our items structured. Finance is very important. You have to get them involved day one. How are we going to structure the system? What are the accounts? What accounting method are we going to use? And why? Because you really have to start asking these questions when decisions are made. Why are we making these decisions? And again, it usually, like I said, with us, it worked okay. We were happy with it toward the end once we got the knowledge together. But I kind of wish if we'd have been able to go back and relive history, I would have gotten more knowledge prior to, as far as our vendors, and made sure that everybody had a better understanding of what we were trying to accomplish. Because I think that was huge for us. Just putting in a system is one thing, but come day one, what does that mean? How does your life change? So I think those are the key points that if I could relive it, those are some of the things I would have focused on.
Okay. And this kind of goes for both of you. We had a question come in from the audience, and it's do you feel that NetSuite's UI is starting to show its age? So I don't know who wants to take that first.
A little
You can
bit.
take
I find a little bit, but
I agree. Yeah, it is. It is.
a little bit.
A
But
little
you
bit.
know what it is? The thing is, the ERP realm is a bit tricky. I find user interfaces within ERP were always looking somewhat legacy. You know, they ERPs always look old. You know, interfaces always, they're not designed for a consumer. They're designed for business users, right? So they always look a little bit legacy. But when I compare, let's say, NetSuite to other ERP systems, even the ones that are in cloud, I find that NetSuite looks better than some other systems that I looked at, including Business Central, Acumatica, Intact. You know, I find their interface looks better, and I think it will continue improving.
Yeah, we're not talking green screen here, but it could use some enhancement. I will agree with you, Elliot.
Well, I know from my personal experience, I came from manufacturing and we were using Sage, and I personally think NetSuite looks a ton more better than that, so a lot more up to date. So I can speak from personal experience on that one. Going back to kind of lessons learned, I guess for Ilya, just what do you think a company can do to best prepare to make an implementation go as smoothly as possible?
I think the number one is make sure that they give themselves enough time. That's number one. Number two, it would be really, really beneficial to have a good number of system subject matter experts, sorry, in different areas, right? So whether they're employees of the firm that are assigned to the project, or consultants, you know, that you hire to provide that expertise. I think that's also very, very important. And then partner selection, extremely important. You need to take your time selecting a partner. Don't be fooled by the size of the partner, right? And by big names. Try to look for people, try to look for expertise within the organization, and then connect with those people for advice. So
Okay.
those are the three elements.
And Aaron, back to you real quick. For anyone who is looking to implement NetSuite today, like what would be the number one advice that you would give that person?
Number one, define what you're trying to get from NetSuite. Figure out what exactly you're trying to do here. What are you trying to gain? Is it an implementation? Are you trying to improve a process, or what are you trying to gain here? Start from the back forward. Get you a really good partner that can help you do this implementation. I mean, somebody that you trust, that knows NetSuite up and down, that knows processes as well. And to some of the Ilya's points, to make sure you have the time to do it. You know, make sure you're going to have the right people involved. I mean, you got to have it from the top down. The CEO has to be involved. Everybody has to be on board to get the implementation to work properly. So those are like my key points.
Gotcha. And one question came in, and it's in regard to kind of configurations, third-party apps. I guess at what point do you kind of have so many configurations, so many third-party apps that maybe NetSuite just isn't a fit for that company? And
That's a
Ilya, I'll
great
let you take that one first.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, if you have this this bowl of different integrations, that, you know, disparate systems, you kind of, you know, in the past you had the disparate systems that weren't talking to each other. But on the flip side, if you have too many systems that are interacting, that's also not good, right? So the key is to find a system that is a suite, kind of like NetSuite, right? You're trying to find a suite that can offer 90% or 85% of the functionality that you need. And if you can hit that percentage, then you're fine. But the key is to have a suite, right, of different modules that are inside of the system, because you don't want to integrate every single thing to NetSuite. right?
Mhm.
And the more integrations you have, the more maintenance you would need. So, but you have to give up on some needs as well, you know, and you have to compromise a bit, right? But the best thing to do is to have a suite um, that is meant to work as a suite, right? So it's a business platform. It's not just ERP. It has CRM. It has order management system. It has case management system. It has WMS. That is the key, and I think that's the future as well.
Yeah, because all these disparate systems are going to give you a maintenance nightmare. There's just no way you can keep all this stuff together. And if you're integrating multiple systems, you do run the risk of things not communicating. We have those issues as well. So to Ilya's point, you're better off getting a suite. That way everything can reside on one platform. You can always add different modules as they're created to the system to give you one house where all your systems can live in versus having disparate systems.
Right. And if look, and a lot of customers come to me and they ask me, Ilya, you know, why don't we, you know, I want to integrate Salesforce to NetSuite, right? A lot of times, you know, that makes sense, right? Let's integrate Salesforce to NetSuite. But a lot of times, the features that Salesforce provides are not used by these companies. And NetSuite can be used as a CRM system for a lot of these companies, right? So the key is to ask, you know, what features of Salesforce do you use to warrant this integration project?
So let's look at the future of NetSuite. For Aaron, where would you like to see NetSuite go from here? What would you like to see added, and what could make it overall just better?
With me, it's just improving the modules. I mean, I like a more enhanced WMS system. I think that would be very beneficial. I think the support needs to improve a little bit as well. I mean, I think they also need to get the application where it can be a global platform. I know NetSuite is in the mid-tiered market, but I believe if they add a couple of tweaks and changes, it can be much more scalable. So large companies, they can maybe get into the SAP space, which I think would make the system just so much better if they could like get it enhanced. I know they've made some changes and they've made improvements from the acquisition from Oracle, but there's other things they could do as well. I think it just needs to be much more scalable as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, they've made some changes since the Oracle acquisition that has made the platform better. I truly believe they spent a lot of money in tech and in marketing, but they have spent money in tech. As see the new release that's coming out now, they've made all type of enhancements. So I'm really pleased with this. But it's going to have to be more scalable in order for them to get to the next market.
Mm,
Right.
okay. And Ilya,
Which
from your
means
perspective,
enterprise, right?
well,
Sorry,
Ilya, from your perspective, the cloud infrastructure with Oracle, has it changed, or has it stayed
I
the
think
same?
it's
Or
I think it's improving. The thing is, what's becoming a little bit difficult to explain to the clients is that there are different tiers within cloud, at least for NetSuite, right? So
Yep.
depending on your tier, depending on what kind of support you need or what kind of hosting you need, you may have a faster working system than others, and that's something that NetSuite is not able to explain correctly to customers, right? So I think that message needs to be a bit clearer, so that customers know what to expect from in terms of speed, in terms of the performance, etc. So I think the communication, NetSuite to client communication needs to improve a little bit, and the expectations need to be set a bit better
Mhm.
when it comes to speed and what's included and what's not.
Okay.
Do you run into that a lot when it's a cloud-based versus on-prem, that they have issues with latency, so the customer, your client isn't happy with the speed of NetSuite?
And we get that, especially, for example, NetSuite hosts sandboxes in a designated data center, right? And all of the sandboxes are hosted there, right? And it's a slower data center, and the sandboxes, as a result, are a bit slower, right? So that frustrates customers, right? So so the network needs to improve a little bit. It's improving, right? But I also think that this is inherent to just transition from on-prem to cloud as well. You cannot expect the cloud to be as fast as on-prem. That's impossible, right? So
Now, as far as the future goes, AI is a big touch point there, and machine learning. Ilya, from your side, have you seen many advances with that within NetSuite?
yes, I'm noticing that a lot of the new modules that are coming out contain some machine learning, some algorithms that are getting really smart. There's a lot of forecasting that is in the works. Consumer advice, also user alerts, you know, that are coming from the data that's being mined by some of these algorithms. So I think it's the future, and I think NetSuite is looking at that, and they're making improvements.
Okay, and Aaron, from just your side, is that even something that's really important to you, or just kind of a nice, okay, it's there?
No, it's important to have, though. I mean, the system, as our change, the system needs to grow with us as well. I mean, what we want today is not going to be what we want tomorrow. I mean, right. The analytics tool, which he brought to my attention, I fall in love with it. I love that module. There's so many things they can do for you that I didn't think the system could function to do for me. So, I mean, the more that they improve the system, the more viable the platform is, and the more people will actually flock to the platform. So, yeah, any improvement you make is going to be an enhancement and something people would like to be able to use.
Right.
Yeah. I guess I think we're kind of at the end here. Is there any last kind of comments or thoughts from you guys that you could just pass along information to anybody out there listening?
Aaron,
you want to go first?
Again, we've been on the platform for 7 years, and as our knowledge has grown, I mean, we have 7 modules: order, cash, procure to pay, WMS system. So we use NetSuite probably 60 to 70% of the capacity that the system could be used. So it's an end-to-end system. NetSuite runs our business. So we've had very few issues with the system. And again, as our business grown, NetSuite has grown with us. Is it perfect? Of course not. No systems are. But we have been pleased because, again, I've worked on multiple systems, and as far as ease of use is concerned, it's going to be hard to beat NetSuite. I mean, if you're on the PKMSs of the world, they're much more convoluted systems. I won't say NetSuite was simple to learn, but once you figure out how the system functions, you can your knowledge will increase at a much quicker pace than dealing with an SAP of the world. Again, we have sandbox instances. They do their releases twice a year, which I like. You're going to get a instance where you can test your release, which I really like that as well too. With us is a bit different because all our systems are integrated, but they're very helpful sometimes when it comes to the release. So everybody has to stay on the same release. So you're not going to fall behind. And when the release comes out, you get the preview. So it's a smooth process to upgrade from one release to the next. That's been a key point for me over the years. We've never really had an issue when it came to the release, and usually the enhancements are getting better now. So the system's growing and evolving now to where the platform is pretty much in line to where our business is at the present moment. Ilya?
My advice would be really on a platform choice side, and it relates to you taking your time to really do a good RFP. Make sure you test various platforms based on that RFP list, right? Just Google, download an RFP list of all the features for your vertical that the system must have, and add more lines to that list, right? And then test when you speak to VARs and to partners, make sure that they cover each of these functional pieces and areas, and explain how they work, right? So take your time, run through the RFP process, test all of the applications or platforms to make sure that they fit your business, right? So take your time. And then the second advice is give yourself enough time for the implementation. ERP implementation is a very complex process. Whoever tells me that's easy, they're just like, you take data, you input it, that's it. I just don't like to hear that. It's a complex process and it takes time. I'm not trying to glorify my job. It's really the reality, right?
And tooting your own horn a little bit, we know
I-
It's well deserved, Ilya. You do actually do fantastic work. So that I can say.
We did have a comment come through the questions area, and I'm not sure if this really has been something that you've experienced, Aaron, but he said adding users for a growing business is pay first, add access later. And he said it should be the opposite. Have you run into this issue at all, Aaron?
Could you repeat that, please? I had trouble hearing you.
Adding users for a growing business is pay first, add access later. And he feels like it should be the opposite. I'm wondering if you've actually run into this issue.
No, we haven't, because our license count is pretty high. We have a system with over 150 users. So we have 200 licenses, but you're gonna run into that. They're not gonna give you anything for free. So, but we don't. I always keep enough licenses to cover myself for future growth.
Yeah. I could definitely see, though, for maybe a smaller business kind of getting their foot in the door, trying to predict how many licenses they'll have over that next year, how that could be a little bit troublesome to do. Just say you didn't quite bring on enough people for that. I mean, Ilya, have you experienced this? Do you know ways around this or ways to handle that?
My advice to customers is buy the minimums, right? Buy minimums. If you're a small startup, buy 10 licenses or 5 licenses or how many users you have, right? And start with that and see how things go. I know NetSuite kind of gives you these different tiers and these different models that confuse customers. I would say don't worry about that piece. Just buy the number of licenses you immediately need and then purchase more if you need it. You can always buy more later. That's my advice.
And they essentially are pretty quick. And you also need to determine if the person's going to be a user that actually needs to access the system. If they're just looking for data and reports, you don't need a license. You can get that information to them in multiple ways. Like Ilya said, they should do everything in NetSuite. So if you're not touching it on a daily basis, you don't need a license.
Yeah.
Right.
You just need to get them access to what they need to the data.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I think that about wraps it up, unless we have another question come through or not. But essentially, I mean, if you guys enjoyed this, oops, I skipped ahead again. If you guys are interested in learning more about NetSuite or want to implement it, you can talk to us. We love just having these kind of brainstorming sessions and talking. We do implementations, we do configurations, we just kind of help people with their NetSuite. So please feel free to contact us. We'd love to help you out. Here's our contact info. I'll also contact everybody who attended today, as well as those who didn't, with a recording. And I think that's it. So everybody stay safe out there and have a great rest of your week. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Aaron.
And Aaron, thank you
guys.
for spending some time with
No
us.
worries. It was my pleasure, guys. Take care. Be safe.
Bye, you too.
All right.